Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. And today I'm going to be doing my wrap up for June. June was Pride Month and I was very busy. I had so much fun making so many fun videos and recommendation lists and also doing a fair amount of reading. So I'm so excited to discuss the books that I ended up reading this month. And without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is a manga I read through the library, and that is going to be the first volume of Boys Run the Riot. This is a manga series about a trans boy. He knows who he is, he knows who he wants to be, but he's very much struggling with a very repressive society where he is not allowed to be out. But he meets another boy in school who's also kind of a delinquent, kind of not perceived the way that he actually is by his peers, and they end up making a fashion brand together. This is a comic I've been interested in, and I want to continue reading it through the library and just kind of evaluating if this is something I just want to read or if it's something I want to collect. But I really enjoyed it, and it's a great pick for Pride Month or any other time in the year. But going into novels, we're going to go from least favorite to favorite, starting off with my least favorite novel, which was going to be Children of Anguish and Anarchy. This is by Todi Ameyemi, and it is the third and final book in the Children of Blood and Bone, or the Children of Orisha series. And this is a young adult fantasy series that was very popular when the first book came out, and it's kind of dipped in popularity as subsequent books came out. I thought the first book was solid. There were definitely some things I didn't love, but I thought it was a solid, fun, fantasy-driven series. Did not love the second book because I felt like it just got a little too melodramatic for my personal taste, but I thought, again, it was not bad. Very much in the wheel of like YA fantasy, but because of what happened at the end of the second book, a lot of people were not interested in the third book. People that did read the third book did not like it, and so I was going into this book with like a very low opinion of what it was going to be. Because of that, I think my expectations were kind of a little bit too low for what it ended up actually being. Very much was reading it in a very neutral light, and so I kind of enjoyed it. I didn't think it was perfect. It is my least favorite book that I read, and I ended up giving it like a 2 stars, but I didn't think it was awful. I might do a review on this, but my problems mostly stem from the fact that this book was not set up by the rest of the series. We're facing a villain that we've never seen before or never talked about really before, and we're going to places that have never been discussed, and so it really doesn't feel like the first 2 books in the series really built up to this conclusion. It feels very disjointed. I really hope that this author goes back and writes more because I think she does have skill, but for the most part, I thought her writing was pretty decent for a fantasy book, and it's more just like some of the choices she made in this book just seemed a little bit random. So like, I didn't think that this was the worst thing ever. I thought it was a bad conclusion to this particular series because again, it didn't build on anything, but I am still looking forward to what she writes in the future, and I really hope that she does try again because I do think she does have skills. I'm glad I finished the series out, glad that it's over. It was interesting for sure. Next book I have is The City in Glass by Nhi Vo. I gave this like a 3 out of 5 stars, maybe like a 2.75. This is a short little novella, or almost novella, very short little novel, and it is about a demon that is rebuilding a city, her city that she's like kind of taken ownership of, and then this angel is coming in and like watching her, and they obviously have like this weird dynamic with each other because angels, you know, sent the demons down to hell kind of a thing, but it's set in a fantasy world, so I guess there's Christianity in this fantasy world. I don't know. I really like Nhi Vo's writing. I love her short novella series. The Singing Hill series is one of my favorites. Sometimes the writing was really beautiful in here and really descriptive and wonderful, and other times it just felt a little clunky. Didn't love it as much as I've loved some of her other books. It just didn't really do much for me. The next book I have is Here We Go Again by Alison Corcoran. I have read the other 2 books that this author has written, which is The Charm Offensive and Kiss Her Once for Me, and I enjoyed both of those books a lot, but this book kind of was a mixed bag for me personally. So this book is about Logan and Rosemary. They are both teachers at their old alma mater, and their favorite teacher has since retired. He has been in cancer treatment for the last 4 years, and it's finally come to the end of his life, and he does not want to die in a facility, and so they are taking him across the US. And Logan and Rosemary had a falling out when they were in high school, and so they have this kind of bitterness towards each other, but they have agreed to take their teacher across the United States despite this, and so obviously there's a lot of feelings that are brought up between them. And again, I just felt very mixed about this. I thought the later half of the novel actually was a lot more successful, and I don't know if that was just because it was really getting into my feelings with the professor obviously getting close to passing away. The more we got of his story and like what he's been going through, and then we got like this section where they go to a gay club and do drag, and then all the emotional stuff with him, that's where I thought the novel like really got me. But the first half of this novel I felt like really struggled. I felt like we needed a lot more flashbacks. We needed a lot more longing to make this like bitterness, this relationship seem believable. Both of these characters have ADHD and they have very different symptoms. Rosemary is much more anxiety driven, much more, I don't know if she's also supposed to be autistic or OCD, but it definitely has like that kind of symptom where she is very type A, very much making lists and preparing, while we have Logan, whose ADHD is more about her being inattentive. And so a lot of their struggles to agree with each other are from their past, but they're also from their communication styles not meshing. And again, I thought this would have been a lot more successful if we had the build up for that instead of just kind of being whole stuff. But I do think that this book did a good job in that beginning half because it doesn't just tell us everything flat. We kind of know that there's some weirdness between them, that they had kind of an argument, but you do have to stick with the novel to find out what that is and what happened. Again, I think the flashback could have been presented better, it could have been done better, but I'm glad it just didn't tell us, like in the first chapter, everything that went between them. It kind of trusted the reader to keep reading, which I know sounds like the bare minimum, but I've read a lot of books recently where it feels like they just don't want to do that. So I gave this like a 3 stars. Again, very mixed feelings on it. Like some stuff, thought the execution on other parts were less successful, but maybe I'll do a full review on this. The next book I have is Say a Little Prayer by Jenna Voris, and this is a young adult contemporary read. So this is about Riley. She came out a year ago as bisexual, and so she left her congregation. She is from a very big church town. So for the past year, she's kind of been in the outs of society. Her sister also had an abortion recently, which also kind of alienated her from the Christian community. So Riley overhears someone saying something bad about her sister, and she resorts to violence, which results in her getting a detention where she is going to be kicked out of the school play, and she very much wants to be part of that. And so she agrees to go to the church's spring camp as a kind of way to reflect on her choices, so that way she can be in the play. So at this camp, it's not all bad because she's going to be with her best friend Julia, who is the pastor's daughter. And as you may have guessed, yes, there is going to be a little bit of something between them, but Riley can't just go to this camp and just deal with it. She has to be a little bit extra, and because the camp is going to be centered around the 7 deadly sins, she decides, I'm just going to commit all of them and prove why they're not so bad. And so I really enjoyed this. I read this physically and I just found myself flying through the text. It was fun, it was punchy, there was a good premise here, but unfortunately this ended up being another 3-star read for me. Just some of the execution wasn't quite there. I felt like this just needed a little bit more development time. The premise with the 7 deadly sins does seem a little bit silly, but I do really like how it was dealt with at the end of the novel. The kind of thing that didn't work for me is the relationship between Julia and Riley. I honestly wish it was a little bit more strained. I feel like it would have been better if Riley had gone to this camp and it was kind of a bittersweet thing that she wasn't going this year, just to really drive up the stakes. Also, if it again pushed on the idea of Julia and Riley being separated, and if this is the first time that they really interacted since a year ago, again, it would have driven up the stakes, made this coming together a little bit more angsty, a little bit driven up the pining a little bit more. All the elements were here. I just felt like there was a little bit more tweaking that needed to go on. And the other thing is that I also felt like personally the scripture stuff needed a little bit more work. Like the pastor, the way he was talking just felt very similar to how Riley talks. At least pastors in my life, I feel like they are very eloquent even when they're saying really awful, horrible stuff. Like they're very good about wrapping it up in a very nice little bow. So I just felt like that needed a little bit more development to make like the camp just feel more realistic. But overall, I really did enjoy this. Again, I flew through it. It was so fun. So if you're looking for a young adult read that has a queer romance but isn't solely focused on it, I think this is a good pick. Really enjoyable. The next book I have is another one that I checked out from the library, and that is going to be If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. This is a book I've wanted to read for a very long time, and I really enjoyed getting to read it on audio through the library. This I gave a 3.75 stars to, so I enjoyed it, but it isn't like a new favorite for me. So this is a contemporary literary fiction book, and it's following 4 different perspectives of these girls that all live in the same building. 3 of them are in their early 20s and dealing with different issues, and another one is a older person and is married and dealing with slightly different issues than the 3 other girls, but they are living in Korea, and a lot of the the storylines have to deal with the idea of like image, perception, beauty, and kind of the worth that a woman is attributed to herself because of those things. And again, I really enjoyed this. The ending might have been a little bit too neat for me, just because it felt like everybody got like a perfect bow ending, but also it was a really interesting book. I did really enjoy it, and I'm glad I finally read it after so many years of wanting to read it. So yeah, it was a nice change of pace to read some literary fiction. The next book I have is Fleet Cute by Meryl Wilson, and this is a much beloved sapphic author, but this is not their first book. I have not read their backlist yet. This is one of their newer titles, and this is following two women on a soccer club. We have Phoebe, who is the team's rookie, and then we have Grace, who is the team's captain. I plan on doing a full review of this, so stay tuned for that. But yes, this is a rom-com. It is very smutty in nature, but it also has both Grace and Phoebe dealing with like internal stuff going on in their lives. Grace is very reserved and does not want to trust people, whereas Phoebe is very boisterous and very bouncy and maybe gets into people's business a little bit too much. And yeah, I enjoyed this. It's like a 3.5, somewhere in there, 3.5, 3.75 stars, and look forward to my full review so I can discuss more thoughts about it. It was good, not my favorite, but still enjoyable. For my next book, I have Looking for a Sign by Susie Dunman. This is another sapphic rom-com, and for being a short book, it does pack a pretty big punch. Like Susie Dunman's last novel, this is more of a contemporary fiction novel that has a little bit of romance thrown in there, which is something that I'm learning that I do really enjoy. Like, I love a good rom-com, I love romance at the center, but I also like stories that are dealing with a character and their journey and then kind of has a little bit of romance. But this is following Gray, who is a lesbian. She just got out of her long-term relationship, and so she is looking for advice. She's feeling really down on her luck. Her friend is very much into astrology and gets her into this very famous astrologist, and she and her friend kind of take that advice that they are given, and she decides to date everybody in the astrological calendar. And so it's her going on these dates with all these different people from all these different backgrounds with different astrology signs and kind of the hijinks that ensue because of that. And at the same time, Gray is starting a new job and kind of the push and pull she's having with her new boss. And yeah, I enjoyed this. I thought it was fun and flirty. This is something I was reading on my walks with an audiobook, so I really enjoyed it for that aspect. And I would give it like a 3.75, 4 stars. Really, really solid read. The next book I have is The Apothecary Diaries, Volume 4 in the Light Novels by Natsu Hyuga. And this novel catches up to where the second season is about to end, but this is a historical drama series following Mao Mao as she lives in the palace. She was sent there against her will, promises to fulfill her 2-year duty so that she can go back to being an apothecary in the red light district. But before she can do that, she gets into some hijinks and she ends up uncovering some mysteries, and because of that she gets sucked deeper into court politics. I love this series. I love the anime, manga. I'm just having such a fun time reading the original series. It's not perfect, but I have so much fun reading it. And yeah, it's really gotten me out of a reading slump. And for my last novel, before I get into what I'm currently reading, I have my favorite novel of the month, which is going to be a nonfiction actually, and that is going to be The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. This is a nonfiction following the life of Henrietta Lacks, who, if you don't know, was very important to science because her cancer cells were taken kind of without her knowledge and used as the first cells in most research. They were the only cells that, for whatever reason, were able to survive, and they are still being used to this day. And so this is her biography of her as a person, and also like the history of cells and cells used in science. And I feel like this novel and what it discusses is still very important today, but I will take this novel with a grain of salt because it is very interesting how this novel talks a lot about exploitation, but the author herself really, I don't want to say stalked, but like really would not take no for an answer with this family and really hounded them until they cooperated and gave her the information she needed for this biography. And like in the end, yes, it was good because Henrietta's story can finally be told, whereas before she has been shrouded in mystery. But at the same time, it's like, it's an interesting dynamic, but it was a fascinating novel and still just a very important novel to like what's going on in science, how the Black community has been kind of taken advantage of and used for experimentation. So I want to read more in this subject matter, but this was a great starting off point. And so to finish off this reading wrap up, here is the book I'm currently reading, which is The 710 Split by Carmen Lee. This is about two teachers who have a history with each other, and they are starting a bowling league at their high school, and I'm almost halfway through this right now, not quite there yet, but it's short, so I should finish it out before the month is over. I will come back and talk about it next month because obviously I haven't finished it yet. But yeah, this is fun, flirty, another sports story. But I will be back in July to let you know how it ended. But so far, enjoying it. Feeling like another 3.5 read, very solid, but like nothing spectacular. But yeah, those are all the books that I read in the month of June. So for series, I was able to complete one more series this month while keeping up with the Apothecary Diaries. And then I was able to read 6 books that I had on my physical TBR. So got a lot of books done that way. And most of them, of course, were queer books for Pride. And then I was also able to read 2 books from the library that I've been really interested in for a really long time. So great reading month overall. Not any new favorites, unfortunately. A lot of good, solid, enjoyable reads. But yeah, that is everything that I read in the month of June. I will be back in July, so stay tuned for that. But thank you so much for watching. I would love to know what you read this month, what you enjoyed. Every like, comment is greatly appreciated on this channel. So thanks again and happy reading.